It was March 4, 1975, when Nashville sanitation worker Robert Bell made a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He was doing his regular route through the upscale Green Hills neighborhood when something caught his eye near a construction site on Copeland Drive. What he thought was discarded clothing turned out to be the body of 9-year-old Marcia Trimble. She had been missing for 33 days. Bell immediately called the police, his hands shaking as he dialed. This moment would mark the beginning of one of Nashville's most enduring mysteries, a case that would remain cold for nearly 5 decades. Marcia Virginia Trimble was born on February 28, 1966, making her just 9 years old when she disappeared. She lived with her parents, Charles and Virginia Trimble, and her younger brother Chuck in the affluent Green Hills area of Nashville. Marcia was described by everyone who knew her as an exceptionally bright and responsible child. She was a straight-A student at Hillsborough Elementary School and had dreams of becoming a teacher. What made Marcia special wasn't just her academic achievements, it was her kindness. Her mother, Virginia, would later recall how Marcia would spend hours helping neighborhood children with their homework. She had a collection of books that she treasured more than toys, and she could often be found reading under the big oak tree in their backyard. Marcia was the kind of child who remembered everyone's birthday and always offered to help with household chores without being asked. February 25, 1975, started like any other Tuesday for the Trimble family. Marcia attended school as usual and came home that afternoon around 3:30 p.m. But this day was different. It was Girl Scout cookie delivery day. Marcia had been excited about this responsibility for weeks. Around 5:15 p.m., Marcia left her house on Copeland Drive with a box of Girl Scout cookies, heading to deliver them to a neighbor just 2 blocks away. Her mother, Virginia, watched from the window as Marcia walked down the street, her blonde hair bouncing with each step. It was a route Marcia had walked many times before through their safe, quiet neighborhood, but Marcia never made it to her destination. When she failed to return home by 6 p.m., Virginia Trimble began to worry. By 7 p.m., the family was frantically searching the neighborhood. The box of Girl Scout cookies was found abandoned on the sidewalk just 3 blocks from her home. The disappearance of Marcia Trimble sent shockwaves through Nashville, particularly the tight-knit Green Hills community. Within hours, hundreds of volunteers joined the search effort. The story dominated local news for weeks, and Marcia's school photograph became one of the most recognizable faces in Nashville. Metropolitan Police Chief Joe Casey called it the most intensive search in Nashville's history at that time. The community implemented new safety measures almost immediately. Children were no longer allowed to walk alone, even in broad daylight. Parents began organizing carpools for activities that children had previously walked to independently. The psychological impact on the Green Hills neighborhood was profound and lasting. Many families moved away, unable to feel safe in a place where such a tragedy had occurred. Those who stayed found their daily routines forever changed by fear and vigilance. The Nashville Metropolitan Police Department launched an immediate and extensive investigation. Detective teams canvassed the entire Green Hills area, conducting over 3,000 interviews in the first month alone. They asked residents about any suspicious activity, unfamiliar vehicles, or individuals they may have seen on February 25th. The last confirmed sighting of Marcia was around 5:25 p.m. by a neighbor who saw her walking north on Copeland Drive, still carrying the box of cookies. This sighting placed her just minutes away from her intended destination when she vanished. Police initially focused on the possibility of abduction by a stranger, given the random nature of the crime and the lack of any obvious motive involving the family. They also explored whether Marcia might have been taken by someone she knew and trusted, which could explain why she went willingly without screaming or struggling. The geographic considerations were crucial. Green Hills was an affluent area where everyone knew their neighbors, making the presence of suspicious strangers more noticeable. The timing, during daylight hours on a weekday, suggested either extreme boldness or local knowledge of the area's routines. The investigation generated numerous persons of interest over the years. One of the earliest suspects was a maintenance worker who had been doing repairs in the neighborhood that day. 32-year-old James Wilson came to police attention when several residents reported seeing him acting strangely near the area where Marcia disappeared. Wilson had a troubled background, including previous arrests for burglary, and residents noted he had been asking personal questions about families in the neighborhood. However, after extensive questioning and investigation, Wilson was cleared when his alibi was verified. He had been at a job site across town during the crucial time period. Another significant person of interest was Robert Hayes, a 28-year-old drifter who had been staying at a local boarding house. Hayes became a suspect when witnesses reported seeing him following young girls in the Green Hills area. He had a history of minor offenses and seemed to have no stable employment or clear reason for being in the neighborhood. Hayes was questioned extensively, but like Wilson, he was eventually cleared when witnesses confirmed his whereabouts during the time of Marcia's disappearance. His struggles with alcohol and mental health issues had made him appear suspicious, but investigators found no concrete evidence linking him to the crime. Despite the intensive initial investigation, the case began to go cold by the end of 1975. Police had conducted over 5,000 interviews, traveled thousands of miles following leads across multiple states, and pursued every credible tip that came in. The technological limitations of the 1970s severely hampered the investigation. There was no DNA testing, no national databases for fingerprints or criminal records, and no internet to quickly share information between jurisdictions. Investigators had to rely on traditional detective work, witness testimony, and basic forensic science. The Trimble family never gave up hope. Virginia and Charles Trimble continued to work with police, following up on new leads and keeping Marcia's case in the public eye. They established a reward fund and regularly appeared on local television, pleading for information. Over the years, key investigators retired or passed away, taking their institutional knowledge with them. Detective Harold Moses, who had been the lead investigator, retired in 1995, still haunted by his inability to solve Marcia's case. Annual case reviews became routine, but no new evidence emerged that could break the stalemate. In 2019, everything changed when the Nashville Metro Police Department's cold case unit got a new commander, Detective Matt Filter. Filter had experience with genetic genealogy, a revolutionary technique that had been making headlines for solving decades-old cases across the country. Filter wasn't a traditional detective in the sense that many people imagine. He had a background in biology and had been following the developments in forensic genealogy closely. When he reviewed the Trimble case files, he discovered that DNA evidence had been collected from the crime scene in 1992 during one of the periodic evidence reviews, but the technology to analyze it properly hadn't existed at the time. Initially, there was skepticism within the department about spending resources on genetic genealogy for a case that was nearly 45 years old. However, Filter convinced his superiors by pointing to recent successes with the Golden State Killer case and other high-profile cold cases solved through similar methods. The process required sending the DNA sample to a specialized laboratory that could extract genetic information and create a profile suitable for comparison with genealogy databases. This technology, known as forensic genetic genealogy, combines traditional DNA analysis with family tree research to identify suspects through their relatives. The genetic genealogy process began in earnest in late 2019. The DNA profile was uploaded to GDmatch, a public genealogy database where people voluntarily share their genetic information to find relatives. The initial search revealed several potential matches, distant cousins who shared small segments of DNA with the unknown perpetrator. Filter worked with genetic genealogist C.C. Moore, who specializes in forensic applications of genealogy research. Together, they began the painstaking process of building family trees for each of the DNA matches, looking for common ancestors and tracing descendants who might be the source of the crime scene DNA. The process involved analyzing hundreds of potential family connections, cross-referencing with birth records, census data, and other genealogical sources. After months of work, they narrowed the field to 3 possible suspects, all men who would have been in their teens or early 20s in 1975 and had connections to the Nashville area. The breakthrough moment came in February 2021, when they obtained a discarded coffee cup from one of the suspects, Jerome Sidney Barrett, who was then 66 years old. The DNA from the cup was a perfect match to the crime scene evidence. Jerome Sidney Barrett was 17 years old when he killed Marcia Trimble in 1975. He had been living just 2 miles from the Trimble home and was familiar with the Green Hills neighborhood. Barrett had a juvenile record for minor offenses, but nothing that would have predicted such a violent crime. What made Barrett's identification particularly shocking was how close police had come to finding him decades earlier. In 1979, Barrett had been questioned in connection with another assault case in Nashville, but at the time, there was no way to connect him to Marcia's murder. Barrett had continued living in the Nashville area for years after the crime, even starting a family of his own. He worked various jobs and maintained what appeared to be a normal life while the Trimble family and the Nashville community lived with the aftermath of his actions. By the time he was identified through genetic genealogy, Barrett was in declining health and living in a care facility. The weight of keeping such a devastating secret for nearly 5 decades had clearly taken its toll on him. On May 8, 2021, nearly 46 years after Marcia Trimble's murder, Nashville police announced that the case had been solved. The press conference was attended by Marcia's brother Chuck, now in his 50s, who had spent his entire adult life wondering who had killed his sister. Chuck Trimble's statement was simple but powerful. "We finally have answers. Marcia can rest in peace and our family can have some closure after all these years." Detective Filter noted that this case demonstrated how genetic genealogy could bring justice even in the oldest cold cases, providing hope for other families still waiting for answers. The resolution of Marcia Trimble's case shows us that even after 5 decades, justice is still possible. The combination of preserved evidence, advancing technology, and dedicated investigators can bring closure to families who have waited a lifetime for answers. What's your take on genetic genealogy being used to solve cold cases? Do you think there are other cases in your area that could benefit from this technology? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about how far forensic science has come. If you found this case as compelling as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into cases that seemed impossible to solve. Next week, we'll be looking at another DNA breakthrough that solved a 40-year-old mystery in just 48 hours. Until then, stay curious and remember, the truth has a way of surfacing even after decades in the dark.